Hi there, my name is Ron Rogers, and this presentation is titled My First Engine Failure on the DC-10. I had a request to do a video on this, so here it comes, and that was on March 31st, 1991. I was a co-pilot on the aircraft. Okay, this is the second time I had an engine failure as a co-pilot, and it's the second time the engine failure was number 3. So there are two valuable lessons to learn here. Don't let me be your co-pilot, and don't fly an aircraft with 3 engines. Now, I must say, later on when I flew the 737, the Airbus 320 and 319, and also the 777, I had no engine failure. So there you go. Get rid of that number 3 engine and your problems go away. Now, let me tell you about this trip back in March 31st of 91. It started out with a Detroit turn. We went Chicago, Detroit, and back. And it was kind of interesting. The captain let me fly away from Chicago O'Hare. That usually isn't the case, but he was being a nice guy. But it was kind of interesting. We get back into Chicago, and the second officer and I are both not too impressed with the captain's flying, and that's kind of unusual because most of the captains were pretty good. But this guy, I don't know what it was, but he didn't impress us with his flying. So I'm taking off out of O'Hare, and we're climbing on out. And we're climbing through about 28,000 feet. We're going on out to San Francisco. It was an evening flight. All right, now I'm hand flying the airplane, and the DC-10 always amazed me. For such a big airplane, boy, did it fly nicely. And it was a joy to fly, and I'm hand flying it up. And I happened to catch out of the corner of my eye that green arrow there is fuel flow. And we were indicating about, I think, 3,000 pounds an hour or so on the fuel flow. And I noticed it went to 0. Suddenly, just went from 3 to 0. Well, I first thought it might be a gauge. And I said, our fuel flow on number 3 just went to 0. And the captain and the second officer, of course, gets their attention. They look down there, and as this is going on, that yellow arrow pointing to the EGT, it's going up, and there's a little yellow light that comes on when you overtemp the engine, and that yellow light come on, and the EGT was rising. And that was kind of interesting. And the captain says, we're overtemping the engine. Well, that was kind of unusual because we weren't doing anything to cause an overtemp, but then all of a sudden the engine just whomp, it failed. Okay, a little bit of very noticeable yaw, and I of course corrected it with rudder and that, and well, number 3's gone, and the second officer and the captain, they go through a couple of checklists, and we're not getting the number 3 engine back, and we're a little heavy, so they decide we're going to have to dump fuel in that. And at that point, the captain says, "I've got the aircraft," and we start heading back over Lake Michigan to dump fuel there. Because I guess it helps with the Chicago water. Of course, you know, at one time the Lake Michigan was called Lake Illinois. That goes way back in history. And it was Lake Illinois until the Great War, where Michigan recaptured it. And if you've been on any of my flights, I usually give that announcement about the naming of the lake. But anyway, irregardlessly, we're going over the lake, we're dumping some fuel, and we're going to come back in and land. So we come back. And we come back into Chicago, and he actually kind of redeemed himself, because I don't know what went on that first part of the leg, but he did a really good job of flying the aircraft. So we were going, okay, we don't know why we got the bad impression, but he flew the aircraft beautifully, and he came in and landed. Of course, they had the fire trucks out there, because you never know what's going to happen. Fortunately, this did not happen, but they were there just in case. And we get to the gate, and fortunately, they had a spare aircraft. I don't know if that happens very much, having a spare DC-10, but it was in the evening, and we were able to get another aircraft. We got everybody off the airplane onto the next aircraft, and which is kind of interesting because they actually had a spare, and we didn't lose any passengers. Nobody got concerned. They knew we'd had an engine failure, and we came back and got a new airplane. We're on our way. But here's where it gets kind of interesting in some respects. Now, the thought was, from the maintenance guys who come on, we told them we lost an engine going through 28,000 feet. And this is the fuel panel on the DC-10. And you've got all these fuel pump switches. Now, a senior flight test pilot told me one time that even if all these pumps are off, you should be able to go right up to cruise altitude without flaming out an engine, because if you have an electrical problem on the bus that controls the boost pumps on your aircraft, the last thing you want is to lose all the engines because they flame out. So he told me that was part of certification, where they have to be able to fly up to cruise altitude with the boost pumps off. But the mechanics come in, and the first thing they say to the engineer is, "Were the boost pumps on?" Well, he wasn't very impressed being accused of having the boost pumps on, and he says, no, the boost pumps were on. And, I'm sure that was verified by the captain, because that was one of the first things he'd look back there. But they go, yeah. So we get a new aircraft, and it was kind of interesting. They come on to our new aircraft, and the mechanics are all apologetic. They said, your tower shaft failed. And we go, what? And he says, well, that's a shaft that runs between the accessory drive up to the engine and is powered by the second stage of the engine, the N2, what's known as N2. And that's why when the tower shaft failed, the fuel flow immediately went to zero, because the fuel pump quit because it had no power. And, the engine just, the way it shut down with having no fuel, it just happened to get hot. I guess that's why we got the overtemp. But they said when they went to start it, they were going to go out there, they were going to start number 3, and they were sure it would start up fine and run, and then they'd go, yeah, you guys really screwed up. And he says when they went to start it, the N2 immediately went up to 20%, which the engines don't accelerate that rapidly. And he says they immediately knew that they had a sheared tower shaft. So they were very apologetic and, said, yeah, it's not your fault. So that was kind of nice. So we got everybody on board, and we headed on to San Francisco. We had a nice, uneventful flight. So this was my second engine failure at United Airlines, my second number 3 engine failure, number 2 out of number 3 engine failures, and my second engine failure was also on the DC-10, second DC-10 engine failure. This gets confusing, right? It was my second engine failure at United, but my second of 3 at my first on the DC-10 of the 2. Okay, I hopefully you followed that. I think I did. Anyway, I hope you found it interesting and enjoyable and maybe slightly entertaining. So, thanks for watching.